princess, welcome to my channel. I hope you're having fun with your hair. Today I'm going to discuss something that has to do with protein overload, and I'm going to share with you some tips to solve protein overload. Now, over the course of my hair journey, that has been my number one problem, preventing protein overload, and that is because I experienced severe protein overload in about 2 years ago, and at that time I didn't have a lot of knowledge about my hair, so I couldn't really deal with it properly. But over time I've come to identify what went wrong, and I've solved it, and I haven't had that experience again. So I'm going to tell you what I did. Now, the first mistake we often commit when it comes to relaxed or texturized hair is to use a lot of protein products with the assumption that we've lost protein, and so we need to add or replenish the protein. Now, that could be the case, but we should also remember that we have individual differences when it comes to textures and when it comes to diet. For me, I got to realize that I had enough protein in my diet, and so I didn't need a lot of protein in my hair. Somehow, some argue that there's nothing like protein sensitive hair, but I do subscribe to the idea that there is something called protein sensitive hair, and that's because my hair is not able to, one, tolerate every kind of protein, and two, it doesn't even tolerate the protein that I love that really well. What I mean is that some people can use any form of protein and they'll be safe. No matter how often they do, they'll be safe. There are some of us who have to be careful when it comes to protein, because apart from the fact that there are different forms of protein for different purposes, you may also realize that your hair, even though you think it is a preventive measure by using protein, your hair may not want any protein at all. That, for me, explains why sometimes you will have people who can drench their hair in protein products and be safe, and some will cry overload in a matter of seconds. That is what I noticed about my hair, that it did not like every kind of protein, and even the proteins that it liked them in moderation. So you find some people using protein every week. For me, I could probably do it once a month and my hair will be okay. So the first thing when it comes to protein overload is to identify why you have the overload, and that may be because your hair doesn't like protein at all. The second mistake that we do when it comes to protein is not to read ingredients. Now, as I said, there are different types of proteins for different purposes. You will have to look at the products you are using and which type of protein you have in those products. That will tell you that you do not want to have that in your hair. If a certain product has given you that overload, it's not about the product but about the ingredient. Most often we tend to dismiss the product without looking at the root, and that is, what kind of protein do you have in the product? For my hair, I realized that it tolerates keratin and silk based proteins. I have friends who do very well with wheat protein and even egg protein. That is their hair. So it's not about throwing away your product, it's about identifying which product, which protein, and leaving it out of your routine. The other thing about protein overload is that usually people tend to go heavy on it in the name of replenishing, and so sometimes they skip reading the instructions. Now, you may want to be careful with that, because there are some proteins, as we classify them as hard proteins, and they do not, and I mean they do not need to be used so often. People skip reading directions, and because of that they tend to overuse the product and they create the overload. So you may want to go back and read your labels and directions to be sure that you have used the product accordingly. For example, I've had people complain about the Afro-G two-step protein treatment, and what I realized was that most of them were using it on a weekly basis. Meanwhile, I think on the product, you are not supposed to do that. You're supposed to use it probably like once every 6 months, or even once in 6 weeks, I think. So you have to be careful about the way you are using the product. The other way to solve your protein overload is to make sure that you have, one, purchased a very moisturizing product, and two, you have eliminated all forms of protein. Now, the reason why you want to eliminate all forms of protein is to ensure that your hair has the opportunity to take in all the moisture it needs, and so you'll be able to curb the protein overload. I realized that in the process of curbing the protein overload, we also still do not look at the products we are bringing in. For example, I made that mistake of buying a product thinking that it is moisturizing, only to end up realizing that it is also a protein-based product. You have to eliminate every form of protein and deal with the situation before incorporating it back in your regimen. The last tip I'll give is to moisturize and moisturize and moisturize with moisturizing products. Now I'm talking about moisturizing in several ways. First of all, you may want to try the baggy or greenhouse effect. That is a method of incorporating moisture in your hair. So you could probably do it every day. I've had people who've done it continuously for about a week and their moisture level was restored. The other thing you try is to also baggy your hair and you have your moisture levels back to normalcy. The other thing you can do is to at least co-wash 2 or 3 times in a week with a moisturizing conditioner, or deep condition 2 or 3 times in the week. You want to quickly curb any damage or breakage from the protein, so doing the moisture treatment more often is going to speed up the process. Now, last but not least, I'm going to talk about your moisturizing and sealing. Most often when we deal with protein overload, we are looking at the deep conditioning aspect, we are looking at avoiding product, yes, but we also tend to ignore the fact that even the moisturizers we use could have protein. So whilst you are trying to reduce the protein by doing the bagging and everything, you would also want to look at your moisturizing and sealing product. From what I have read, even coconut can be a form of hindrance to your moisture level because it prevents the loss of protein. So that means that if you're going to pre-poo with coconut oil, you are indirectly sabotaging your progress to moisture retention, and that could also be a problem. So you have to consider eliminating some of these oils so you can restore your hair. Then again, with the issue of moisturizing and sealing, if you realize that your moisturizer has protein, then you may have to replace it. Now I like the ORS hair repair cream. They have the moisturizing one, is very good. Try to focus on only moisture products and your hair will be restored. So these are some of the tips for you to help solve your protein overload, and I wish you success in it. Stay blessed.